Kyleth pressed his long fingers against the smooth control panel and watched the blue planet spin slowly on the main screen. For 30 years he had been watching the humans from this hidden station far beyond their solar system, and every day they surprised him more. His partner Morvaine sat beside him making soft, clicking sounds with her throat, which meant she was thinking hard about something important. The humans had built their first space station only 50 years ago, but now they had ships flying between planets and weapons that could destroy entire cities. Most species took thousands of years to reach this level, but humans did it in less than a century. This made both Vallani scientists very nervous, because fast growth usually meant a species was either very smart or very dangerous, and they were not sure which one humans were. Morvaine stopped clicking and pointed at a new signal on their instruments. Something big was coming toward the human solar system from the outer rim of the galaxy, and it was not friendly. The ship's signatures matched. The Craxi Dominion, which meant trouble for everyone. The Craxi were warriors who believed that young species should be destroyed before they became threats to older civilizations. Captain Hyun-woo sat in his command chair aboard the Earth Defense Force flagship when the communication officer turned toward him with wide eyes. The young woman's hands were shaking as she reported that long-range sensors had detected alien ships approaching their system. Hyun-woo felt his heart beat faster but kept his voice calm when he asked how many ships and how much time they had. The answer made everyone on the bridge go quiet. 27 large warships were coming toward Earth, and they would arrive in less than 6 hours. Hyun-woo immediately opened communication channels to Admiral Ji-hai, who commanded all human space forces. When her face appeared on the screen, she already looked like she knew something bad was happening. Admiral Ji-hai listened to the report without saying anything for a long moment. Her dark eyes looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet, and she began giving orders in a voice that sounded like she was discussing dinner plans rather than possible extinction. She told Hyun-woo to contact all defense stations and begin full mobilization of every combat vessel in the system. What happened next made Kyleth and Morvaine stare at their screens in disbelief. The humans did not try to hide or run away or send messages asking for help from other species. Instead, they began moving their ships toward the approaching aliens with a speed that seemed impossible. Every human vessel, from tiny fighters to massive battleships, started forming into attack formations as if they had been practicing for this moment their entire lives. Lieutenant Commander Do-yun received his orders while his destroyer was patrolling near Mars and immediately changed course toward the outer system. His crew of 90 men and women began preparing weapons and checking equipment with an efficiency that would have impressed even the Craxi. Do-yun had never fought aliens before, but he had studied every battle in human history and was ready to add this one to the list. The Craxi War Commander Thylex observed the human response from his flagship and felt confused. Most species either surrendered immediately or tried to negotiate when faced with Craxi military power. Some tried to run away to other star systems, but these humans were actually moving toward his fleet as if they wanted to fight. This had never happened before in all his years of conquest. Thylex sent the standard message that the Craxi used for all primitive species. He told the humans that their solar system now belonged to the Craxi Dominion, and they had 1 hour to surrender all military forces and prepare for occupation. Any resistance would result in the complete destruction of their species. This message had worked on 43 other civilizations, and Thylex expected the same result. Admiral Ji-hai received the alien message while standing in the command center, deep inside Earth's largest space station. Around her, dozens of officers coordinated the movement of human ships and prepared weapons systems for battle. When the translation program finished converting the alien words into human language, Ji-hai read it twice to make sure she understood correctly. The alien message demanded immediate surrender and threatened to destroy all humans if they refused. Ji-hai looked at the tactical display showing her ships moving into position and smiled in a way that would have terrified any species that understood human expressions. She told the communication officer to send a reply asking the aliens for their exact coordinates so human forces could meet them for negotiations. Kyleth watched this exchange and felt his stomach twist with worry. In Vallani culture, asking for coordinates meant you wanted to surrender peacefully, but he had studied human behavior for decades and knew they used the same request when they wanted to attack someone. The aliens and humans were talking to each other but saying completely different things. Captain Hyun-woo gathered his senior officers in the briefing room and spread tactical charts across the table. His weapons officer, Commander Tae-min, studied the projected enemy formations and suggested they could use hit-and-run attacks to slow down the alien advance. His navigation officer, Lieutenant Soo-jin, recommended setting up defensive positions around Earth and making the aliens come to them. Hyun-woo listened to all the suggestions, but kept thinking about something his grandfather had told him about: old wars on Earth. The best way to win a fight was to make the enemy fight your kind of battle instead of their kind. These aliens probably expected humans to act like other species they had conquered, but humans were not like other species. Meanwhile, Sergeant Yoon-ji prepared her Marine unit for possible boarding operations. She had studied the alien ship designs from the sensor data and noticed they had large open spaces inside, which meant they were not built for fighting inside the ships. If human forces could get aboard the alien vessels, they might be able to cause serious damage with small groups of fighters. The Craxi fleet continued moving toward the inner solar system, while Thylex waited for the human surrender. His tactical officers reported that human ships were still approaching instead of withdrawing, but Thylex assumed this was just confusion. Once the humans saw the size and power of the Craxi fleet, they would realize resistance was hopeless. Morvain began recording everything that happened because she knew other Villani scientists would not believe her reports without evidence. No species in galactic history had ever responded to a Craxi ultimatum by asking where they could find the Craxi ships. Most civilizations tried to hide from the Craxi or begged them to go away. Admiral Ji-hai stood before a massive display showing the positions of all human and alien forces in the solar system. Her staff waited for orders while she studied the tactical situation. The aliens had more ships and probably better weapons, but they were spread out in a formation designed for intimidation rather than combat. This gave the humans several advantages if they acted quickly and decisively. The alien reply to the human coordinate request arrived while Ji-hai was planning her attack. The message contained detailed star charts showing exactly where each Craxi ship would be positioned. The aliens seemed eager to provide this information, which confirmed what Ji-hai suspected about their military doctrine. They were used to fighting species that surrendered before battles began. Kyleth realized with growing horror that both species were moving toward a battle that neither side really understood. The humans thought they were facing an invasion that threatened their survival. The Craxi thought they were accepting the surrender of another primitive species. Both groups were preparing for completely different kinds of encounters, and neither realized their mistake. The countdown to contact began as human and alien fleets moved closer together in the cold darkness of space. War Commander Thylex studied the human response message for the third time and felt satisfied with how quickly these aliens had agreed to meet for surrender negotiations. The human request for coordinates showed they understood Craxi's superiority and wanted to hand over their military forces without unnecessary destruction. This would be another easy conquest to add to his record. Thylex ordered his fleet to move into collection formation, which spread the Craxi ships across a wide area to gather surrendering vessels and process prisoners efficiently. His officers began preparing holding cells and transport shuttles for the human crews who would soon become slaves in Craxi mining colonies. The war commander felt pleased that this operation would finish ahead of schedule. Commander Do-yun watched the alien ships spread out and immediately recognized an aggressive advance formation. The enemy was trying to surround human forces and cut off their escape routes, which meant they planned to destroy every human vessel. Do-yun increased power to weapon systems and sent tactical updates to other human ships warning them about the alien battle plan. The Villani observers, Kyleth and Morvain, watched both fleets prepare for contact and realized neither side understood what the other was doing. The Craxi were positioning themselves to accept a surrender that would never come. The humans were preparing to fight an enemy that thought the battle was already over. This kind of misunderstanding had never happened before in recorded galactic history. Sergeant Yoon-ji sat in the armory of her transport ship, sharpening her combat knife while humming a song her mother used to sing. Around her, 40 other Marines checked their weapons and equipment with the calm efficiency of people who had trained for this moment since childhood. None of them seemed worried about fighting aliens for the first time, which would have amazed any other species in the galaxy. Kyleth observed the human Marines through long-range sensors and felt his skin change color with fear. Most intelligent species spent hours or days preparing mentally for combat, and many never recovered from the psychological trauma of violence. But these humans acted like fighting was just another job they needed to complete before going home for dinner. Captain Minho activated the communication system aboard his heavy cruiser and began broadcasting what humans called standard pre-battle messages. He challenged the alien fleet to honorable combat and promised they would receive fair treatment if they fought bravely. He also warned them that human forces would show no mercy to anyone who targeted civilian populations or used forbidden weapons. Thylex received these strange messages and felt confused about their meaning. The humans seemed to be discussing rules for fighting even though they had already agreed to surrender. Perhaps their translation systems were not working properly, or they were trying to negotiate better terms for their captivity. Thylex decided to ignore the messages and continue with the collection operation. Lieutenant Commander Taemin positioned his destroyer squadron in attack formation and waited for orders to engage. His crews had spent weeks practicing combat maneuvers, and everyone knew exactly what to do when the fighting started. The aliens probably expected humans to use defensive tactics, but Taemin planned to charge directly at the enemy ships and hit them before they could react. Morvain began sending emergency reports to the Villani High Council, warning them about what was going to happen in the human solar system. She explained that two species with completely different concepts of warfare were about to meet in battle, and the results would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Her superiors told her to continue observing and prepare detailed records. Admiral Jihai stood in her command center watching the tactical display show both fleets moving closer together. She had fought in dozens of battles during the human colonial wars, but never against an alien species. However, she knew that all intelligent beings had weaknesses, and her job was to find them before the enemy found human weaknesses first. The distance between human and alien forces continued to decrease while both sides prepared for contact in completely different ways. The Craxi activated prisoner transport systems and prepared to receive surrendering humans. The humans armed weapons and planned attack routes through the alien formation. Neither group realized how badly they had misunderstood each other. Captain Hyunwoo received final intelligence reports about alien ship capabilities and shared them with his officers. The enemy vessels were larger than human ships and had stronger shields, but they seemed designed for fighting at long range against opponents who would try to run away. This suggested the aliens were not used to enemies who fought back aggressively. Sergeant Eunji finished preparing her equipment and began studying deck plans of Craxi ships that human intelligence had compiled from sensor scans. The alien vessels had wide corridors and large open spaces which would be perfect for human boarding parties. She could already see several ways to reach critical systems if her Marines could get inside enemy ships. Thylex noticed that human ships were still approaching instead of stopping to surrender, but assumed they were simply moving to the designated collection points. Some species needed extra time to understand Craxi procedures, especially when they had never encountered such an advanced civilization before. He ordered his crews to be patient with the primitive aliens. Commander Do Yoon activated tactical computers and began plotting attack vectors through the alien formation. His weapons officer reported that all systems were ready, and his navigation team had calculated the best approach routes. Du Yun felt the familiar excitement that came before battle and wondered if aliens felt the same emotions when they prepared to fight. Kyleth watched human vital signs through remote sensors and noticed something that made him feel sick with worry. The humans showed all the biological indicators of predators preparing to hunt rather than intelligent beings facing a crisis. Their heart rates increased, and stress hormones flooded their systems, but instead of fear responses, they displayed what could only be described as anticipation. The Craxi continued moving into collection positions, while human forces accelerated toward contact. Admiral Jihai had given her fleet commanders complete authority to engage when they reached optimal range, which meant the battle could begin at any moment. She knew that surprise would be the most important factor in the opening minutes of combat. Lieutenant Sujin monitored alien communications and reported that the enemy seemed to be discussing prisoner management rather than battle tactics. This confirmed intelligence estimates that the Craxi expected humans to surrender without fighting. Such arrogance would cost them dearly when human ships opened fire. Morvain realized that she was about to witness something unprecedented in galactic civilization. Every previous first contact between species had ended in either peaceful communication or one side retreating without major conflict, but humans and Craxi were both moving toward a battle that would change how the galaxy thought about warfare forever. War Commander Thylex felt confident that this operation would be remembered as one of his most efficient conquests. The humans were cooperating perfectly, and soon the Craxi Dominion would control another solar system. He began composing his victory report while watching human ships move into what he thought were surrender positions. Captain Minho received permission to engage when enemy ships came within weapons range. He looked around his bridge at the men and women who would fight beside him and felt proud to serve with such people. Whatever happened in the next few hours would prove to the galaxy that humans were not a species that could be easily conquered. The final minutes before contact ticked away as both fleets prepared for an encounter that neither side truly understood. Commander Taemin watched the distance counter reach optimal firing range and gave the order that changed galactic history forever. His destroyer squadron opened fire on the Craxi fleet with every weapon they had while accelerating directly toward the enemy ships. The aliens had expected negotiations, but instead received a coordinated assault from forces they thought were surrendering. Kyleth stared at his instruments in disbelief as human ships charged into the alien formation without any regard for their own safety. Most species used careful tactics and tried to minimize casualties when fighting, but these humans acted like they wanted to get as close to the enemy as possible. This behavior violated every rule of intelligent warfare that had developed over millions of years. War Commander Thylex felt his ship shake under human weapons fire and could not understand what was happening. The primitive aliens were shooting at his fleet instead of surrendering as planned. His tactical officers screamed warnings about human ships approaching at ramming speed, but Thylex refused to believe what his sensors were telling him. Captain Sujin received orders to ram her heavy cruiser into the largest Craxi battleship and accepted the mission without hesitation. She ordered her crew to evacuate to escape pods while she remained on the bridge to guide the ship during its final approach. Her navigation computer calculated the perfect impact angle to cause maximum damage to the enemy vessel. Morvain watched a human ship deliberately crash into an alien warship and felt her 3 hearts stop beating for several seconds. No intelligent species had ever used ramming tactics because it meant certain death for the attacking crew. But humans seemed to consider this a normal part of combat rather than an act of desperate madness. The collision between Sujin's cruiser and the Craxi battleship created a fireball visible from Earth. Both ships were destroyed instantly, but the explosion damaged 2 other alien vessels and created debris that interfered with Craxi communications. Sujin's sacrifice had eliminated 3 enemy ships and disrupted their battle coordination. Lieutenant Jae-sung led his boarding party through the breach in a damaged Craxi vessel while wearing magnetic boots and breathing recycled air. Fighting inside a ship that was venting atmosphere into space should have been impossible, but human Marines had trained for exactly this situation. They moved through the alien corridors like they owned them. Thylex tried to understand how humans could fight in vacuum without proper environmental suits. His own crews needed sealed armor and life support systems to operate outside their ships, but these primitive aliens seemed to ignore basic survival requirements. They fought in conditions that would kill most species within minutes. Admiral Ji Hai watched the tactical display show human forces penetrating deep into the alien formation. Her captains were using ramming attacks and boarding operations to destroy enemy ships from inside while the main fleet provided covering fire. This combination of tactics had never been used before because no species was crazy enough to try them. Commander Do-yun brought his destroyer alongside a Craxi cruiser and used magnetic clamps to lock the ships together. His crew began cutting through the alien hull with plasma torches, while enemy forces inside tried to break the connection. Do-yun had studied the ship designs and knew exactly where to place charges for maximum structural damage. Kyleth began, recording detailed observations about human combat behavior because other Villani scientists would never believe his reports without evidence. Humans fought like they had no concept of acceptable losses or strategic withdrawal. Every engagement was treated as a fight to the death, regardless of the tactical situation. The Craxi discovered that their ships were not designed for internal combat when human boarding parties reached critical systems. Alien vessels were built for long-range warfare against enemies who used similar tactics. Nobody had ever prepared for opponents who would fight inside your ship while it was still in battle. Sergeant Yunji's Marines captured the engineering. section of a Craxi destroyer and began setting demolition charges throughout the compartment. The alien crew tried to stop them but had no experience with close-quarters combat. Yunji's people moved through the ship like they had trained on it their entire lives. Morvain observed human vital signs during combat and discovered something that terrified her more than anything else. The humans became calmer and more focused. As the fighting intensified, instead of showing normal stress responses, they performed better under pressure, which was the opposite of every other intelligent species. War Commander Thylex sent frantic messages to Craxi High Command, requesting immediate reinforcements. His reports described humans as insane creatures who used suicide attacks and fought inside damaged ships. The Craxi military had no doctrine for dealing with enemies who ignored basic survival instincts. Captain Minho received reports that his boarding parties had captured 3 alien ships and were preparing to turn their weapons against the rest of the Craxi fleet. This was exactly what human planners had hoped for when they developed boarding tactics. Enemy ships became weapons against their own forces. Lieutenant Commander Taemin's destroyer took heavy damage from alien weapons, but continued fighting even after losing main power. His crew rigged emergency systems to keep weapons operational, and used maneuvering thrusters to stay in the battle. The ship was dying but refused to stop fighting. Kyleth watched a human vessel that should have been declared destroyed continue attacking enemy ships with backup weapons and auxiliary power. Most species would have abandoned such a damaged vessel, but the human crew seemed determined to keep fighting until nothing remained of their ship. The Craxi began to understand that they faced something unprecedented in galactic warfare. These humans did not fight to achieve military objectives or gain territory. They fought like every battle was a personal insult that required complete victory to resolve. This psychology was completely alien to civilized species. Admiral Jihai ordered her reserve forces to press the attack while the aliens were confused and disorganized. Human ships moved through the enemy formation, destroying everything they could reach while taking casualties that would have broken any other military force. But human losses only seemed to make the survivors fight harder. Commander Do-Yoon's boarding party reached the command center of a Craxi battleship and captured the alien officers alive. The prisoners would provide valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities and intentions. Do-Yoon's people treated their captives according to human military law, even though they were in the middle of a desperate battle. Morvain realized that humans followed rules of warfare even while doing things that seemed completely insane. They protected prisoners and avoided targeting civilian areas, but used tactics that terrified every intelligent observer. This combination of honor and brutality was unlike anything in galactic civilization. War Commander Thylex watched his carefully planned operation collapse into chaos as human forces continued their relentless assault. Half his fleet was destroyed, or captured, and the remainder was scattered across the solar system. He had never seen anything like the human style of warfare and had no idea how to counter it. The battle that was supposed to end with human surrender instead became a demonstration of why the galaxy should fear this strange species that treated impossible odds as interesting challenges rather than reasons to quit fighting. Admiral Jihai studied the tactical display showing scattered Craxi forces retreating toward the edge of the solar system and made a decision that shocked even her own officers. Instead of defending Earth's orbital space, she ordered the entire human fleet to pursue the fleeing aliens and destroy them before they could escape. This violated every principle of defensive warfare, but Jihai understood something about human nature that aliens could never comprehend. Kyleth watched human ships abandon their defensive positions and chase the retreating Craxi fleet toward open space. Most species would have been satisfied with driving off the invaders, but humans seemed to consider this only the beginning of the battle. They were taking the fight to their enemies instead of waiting for the next attack. Colonel Wu Jin prepared his ground assault forces for something that had never been attempted in galactic history. His troops would use drop pods to deploy directly onto enemy warships while they were still in combat. The aliens had designed their vessels assuming that infantry attacks were impossible in space, but human military doctrine included plans for exactly this situation. War Commander Thylex received reports that human infantry was falling from space onto his ships and refused to believe what his officers were telling him. Ground forces could not operate in vacuum and certainly could not assault a moving starship, but his security teams were sending panicked messages about armed humans inside the ship corridors. The first wave of human drop troops landed on 3 Craxi vessels simultaneously, while their comrades provided covering fire from nearby ships. Colonel Wu Jin's Marines used magnetic grapples and armor thrusters to reach their targets despite enemy defensive fire. They moved through space like they had been born for this kind of warfare. Morvain observed human soldiers fighting inside alien ships while their vessels maneuvered through a running space battle. This required coordination and training that seemed impossible for any organic species to achieve. The humans acted like they had practiced these tactics for generations instead of inventing them during combat. Pilot Ye Jin led her fighter squadron in attacks that violated every rule of sensible aerial combat. Instead of maintaining safe distances and using long-range weapons, her pilots flew directly into enemy defensive formations and used their own fighters as guided missiles. They stayed aboard their ships until the last possible moment to ensure accuracy before ejecting. Kyleth documented the human use of suicide tactics, but realized these were not desperate actions of a losing force. The humans calculated exactly how much damage each sacrifice would cause and used these attacks as part of larger tactical plans. They treated their own lives as resources to be spent efficiently rather than treasures to be preserved. The Craxi discovered that their defense systems could not target human fighters that were deliberately crashing into their ships. The weapons were designed to destroy incoming missiles, not manned vehicles whose pilots could adjust their approach at the last second. Human tactical thinking was so alien that it bypassed every defensive doctrine. Admiral Jihai's flagship moved through the battle zone, coordinating attacks on fleeing Craxi vessels while her crew worked with mechanical precision. She stood on the bridge watching her forces pursue enemies who were trying to escape and felt satisfied that the human response was proceeding according to plan. This was exactly how her species dealt with threats. Lieutenant Commander Do Yun received orders to capture at least one Craxi ship intact for intelligence purposes. His boarding parties had developed techniques for taking enemy vessels without destroying critical systems. They moved through alien ships like surgeons removing specific organs while keeping the patient alive. War Commander Thylex tried to send retreat signals to his remaining ships, but the humans interpreted these communications as tactical coordination. The human fleet responded by attacking even more aggressively because they thought the aliens were planning a counteroffensive. Every Craxi attempt to disengage resulted in escalated human aggression. Dr. Young-Soo worked in a mobile laboratory aboard a human assault transport studying captured Craxi technology while battles raged around his ship. The fact that humans conducted scientific research during combat operations amazed the Villani observers who had never seen such behavior. Most species stopped all non-essential activities when fighting began. Colonel Wu Jin's drop troops captured the command section of a Craxi heavy cruiser and began downloading enemy databases while their ship was still under attack. Human soldiers protected the research teams while fighting alien security forces in corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting. They seemed to find this situation normal rather than terrifying. Kyleth realized that humans treated warfare as a form of problem-solving rather than an unfortunate necessity. They studied their enemies during combat and adapted their tactics in real time based on what they learned. This ability to think clearly under extreme stress was unique among galactic civilizations. The Craxi High Command received Thylex's reports about human combat capabilities and initially dismissed them as impossible. No species could fight the way he described without destroying themselves through reckless aggression. But as more ships sent similar messages, the Craxi leadership began to understand they faced something unprecedented. Captain Minho's heavy cruiser rammed through a Craxi defensive formation while his crew prepared boarding pods for assault on the enemy flagship. The ship was taking heavy damage, but everyone aboard continued their duties like they were conducting a routine training exercise. Human focus under pressure exceeded anything the Villani had observed. Morvain documented human behavior during extended combat and discovered they became more efficient as the fighting continued. Other species showed degraded performance after prolonged stress, but humans seemed to thrive in chaotic situations. This suggested they had evolved specifically for warfare, which was a terrifying concept. Pilot Ye Jin's squadron destroyed 4 enemy fighters by using their own ships as weapons. While she coordinated the attacks from her command fighter, she calculated impact angles and timing with precision that impressed even alien observers. Her pilots followed orders that would mean certain death with enthusiasm rather than resignation. Admiral Ji-Hai watched the tactical display show Craxi. Forces scattered across a vast area of space, while human ships hunted them down individually. This was not the defensive battle she had planned, but rather a pursuit operation that would eliminate the alien threat completely. Human military doctrine demanded total victory rather than mere survival. War Commander Thylex found his flagship surrounded by human vessels, while his crew reported boarding parties in every section of the ship. The primitives had somehow coordinated simultaneous assaults on multiple decks while maintaining perfect communication. His officers were surrendering one by one as humans captured each compartment. Dr. Young-Soo's research team completed their analysis of Craxi weapons technology and transmitted the data to other human ships in real time. This allowed the fleet to adjust their tactics based on scientific observations made during active combat. The integration of research and warfare was something no other species had achieved. The battle that began as a Craxi conquest attempt had become a demonstration of human military capabilities that would change galactic civilization forever. Every assumption about intelligent warfare was being rewritten by a species that treated impossible odds as interesting challenges rather than reasons to surrender. The battle ended when War Commander Thylex surrendered his remaining forces to Admiral Ji-Hai after losing more than half his fleet to human attacks. But instead of accepting the surrender and returning to defensive positions, Ji-Hai ordered her ships to pursue the scattered Craxi vessels that were fleeing toward their home territory. This concept of total victory was completely alien to galactic military doctrine. Kyleth and Morvain watched human forces chase defeated enemies across interstellar space and realized they were observing something that had never happened before in recorded history. Most species accepted surrender when offered and allowed beaten opponents to retreat with dignity. But humans seemed to consider partial victory as incomplete work that needed finishing. Captain Hyun-woo led the pursuit force toward the edge of the solar system, while his crew prepared for extended operations far from Earth. His officers showed no concern about fighting deep in enemy territory because they understood that human military strategy focused on eliminating threats rather than managing them. The Craxi would not be allowed to regroup and attack again. Morvain began compiling her final report about human combat behavior while her hands shook with emotions that had no equivalent in human language. She had witnessed a species that violated every assumption about intelligent warfare, and her observations would terrify civilizations across the galaxy. The humans were not just dangerous, they were fundamentally different from every other form of life. Commander Do-Yun brought his prize crew aboard a captured Craxi battleship and began studying alien technology while the battle continued around him. Human technical teams worked with scientific enthusiasm to understand enemy capabilities and weaknesses. They treated captured weapons like interesting puzzles rather than tools of destruction. Admiral Ji-Hai stood in her command center receiving reports from ships scattered across the outer solar system as they hunted down fleeing Craxi vessels. Her officers coordinated multiple pursuit operations with the same calm efficiency they used for routine patrols. The fact that they were fighting aliens for the first time seemed irrelevant to their performance. Kyleth sent emergency communications to the Vellani High Council warning them that a new type of species had been discovered in the galaxy. His reports described humans as creatures that became more dangerous when threatened and treated warfare as an art form to be perfected. The Council initially refused to believe such beings could exist. The last Craxi ship in the solar system was captured by Colonel Wu Jin's ground forces after a boarding action that lasted 3 hours. The alien crew surrendered when human Marines reached their command center, but the humans continued searching the ship for useful intelligence. They treated prisoners according to their military laws while extracting every piece of valuable information. Dr. Young-Soo completed his analysis of captured Craxi technology and discovered that alien weapons were designed for fighting species that used predictable tactics. The humans had won because they did things the enemy could not anticipate or counter. This suggested that human unpredictability was a significant military advantage. War Commander Thylex found himself imprisoned aboard a human ship while his captors treated him with courtesy that confused him completely. The humans had defeated his forces using tactics that seemed insane, but they followed rules of warfare that protected prisoners and civilians. This combination of brutality and honor was incomprehensible to Craxi thinking. Admiral Ji-hai received a communication request from the hidden Villani observation station and agreed to meet with the alien scientists who had been watching human development. She was curious about their species and wanted to understand why they had been observing Earth without making contact. This would be humanity's first peaceful encounter with galactic civilization. Captain Hyun-woo prepared his ship for the meeting, with representatives of an advanced alien species that claimed to be friendly. His crew remained at battle stations because human military doctrine assumed all unknown contacts were potentially hostile until proven otherwise. They had learned caution from their encounter with the Craxi. Kyleth and Morvain approached the human fleet in a small diplomatic vessel while broadcasting messages of peaceful intent. They had observed human behavior for decades, but had never actually communicated with them directly. The prospect of meeting these dangerous creatures face to face filled them with excitement and terror. The first conversation between humans and a peaceful alien species took place aboard Admiral Ji-hai's flagship while both sides tried to understand each other. Kyleth explained that the Villani had been monitoring human development and were amazed by their rapid progress. He also mentioned that most galactic civilizations would be terrified by human military capabilities. Commander Do-yun joined the diplomatic meeting to provide technical assessments of alien technology and capabilities. His calm discussion of capture and analysis procedures made the Villani scientists realize that humans treated warfare as a scientific discipline rather than an emotional response. This clinical approach to violence was more frightening than rage. Morvain asked Admiral Ji-hai why humans had pursued fleeing enemies instead of accepting their surrender and defending Earth. The Admiral explained that human military doctrine required the complete elimination of threats because partial victories allowed enemies to return stronger. This concept of total war was unknown in galactic civilization. Dr. Young-soo presented his research findings about Craxi technology and suggested that human forces could have won the battle much faster if they had used more aggressive tactics. He mentioned that the human fleet had been operating under rules of engagement designed to give enemies a fair chance to surrender. The aliens realized they had witnessed human restraint rather than full capability. Kyleth learned that humans considered their performance against the Craxi to be a minor engagement that demonstrated basic defensive tactics. The species that had terrified him was describing the most violent battle in galactic history as routine training exercise. He began to understand why the galaxy should fear these creatures. Admiral Ji-hai offered to share human military knowledge with the Villani in exchange for information about other galactic civilizations. She explained that humans preferred to understand potential threats before they became actual problems. This proactive approach to security violated every principle of peaceful coexistence. The Villani scientists returned to their station carrying data about human military capabilities that would revolutionize galactic politics. Kyleth immediately began preparing reports for every major civilization, warning them about the species that had just announced its presence through violence. The humans had proven they were not just dangerous, they were unprecedented. Captain Hyun-woo received orders to escort the captured Craxi vessels back to Earth, where their crews would be processed according to human military law. The prisoners would be treated fairly, but they would also be studied to help humans understand potential alien threats. This combination of mercy and pragmatism typified human behavior. Morvain's final report to the Villani Council concluded with a recommendation. That became the foundation of new galactic policy. Under no circumstances should any member species initiate hostilities with humans because they did not fight wars in any recognizable sense. Instead, they solved problems that happened to involve violence, and they solved them completely. The news about human military capabilities spread across the galaxy through diplomatic channels and trade networks. Advanced civilizations that had dominated space for millions of years suddenly realized they shared the galaxy with a species that treated warfare as entertainment and considered impossible odds to be interesting challenges rather than reasons to surrender. Admiral Ji-hai stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching Earth grow larger on the main screen while her fleet returned home victorious. She had proven that humans could defend themselves against alien threats, but more importantly, she had announced to the galaxy that humanity would not be intimidated by superior numbers or advanced technology. The first contact between humans and Galactic civilization ended with a new understanding on both sides, but for very different reasons.